You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace, you're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut. And we got the man of the hour, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Brother, enjoying life, brother. Being at peace and enjoying life. How about yourself?
Same here, If all else fails, the number one thing you got is peace, right?
Every day.
Every day. Shoot. Indeed. But before we get too far, I wanted to remind you all that this podcast was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology and our patrons on Patreon. All right. Want to send a special shout out to Uncle Mahai, Ijala, and Kinemeti. Yeah. I want to give a shout out to all our Patreons, really showing a true support for what we do. And we definitely appreciate you guys, wanting to see the podcast grow and us take it to the next level. All right. What you think about that, Brother Rod, the whole Patreon support, model that, we got going on?
I appreciate it. First and foremost, it's appreciated, and I try to stay real busy. So if you don't necessarily hear immediately back, you're gonna hear it through here that it's appreciated. We love the support, and it does help because we definitely want to do bigger and better things with the format and the way the show is going to go. So we're looking forward to keeping it going, and the more Patreons we have, the better we can do as far as keeping the show going. So much obliged, and thank you once again.
Absolutely. It's just what astrology is a very underappreciated type of science, I think, personally. And I watch a lot of I like to watch a lot of little space shows and stuff like that. And I just think the world would be much better if astronomy and astrology was like, two sides of the same coin once again.
Once again,
yes. I think we can go pretty far. Just wanted to definitely shout you guys out for helping that with, because that's what we doing with this. We're doing a podcast trying to get it to the world, but we want to legitimize the science with precise prediction and relevant conversations about life through the lens of astrology. So we definitely appreciate that. But as far as our two entities, Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia, you can find Push It Forward on Instagram. You can find it on the website pushitforward.com, pushitfwd.com. Both the Instagram and the website has the same type of spelling. There we got short films. You can find this podcast on there. You can find our YouTube channel. And we got a lot of other things going up. You can get the Ninth Lord films from Push It Forward, which is my film entity. And Brother Ra, tell the people about Caliprucia.
Yeah, you can hit me up through calipruciaastrology@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on either Facebook or IG via Shechem Ra. So it should be the same tag on both FB and IG. Either one of those should definitely ring my bell. So get at me if you need me.
Indeed. You know what? Speaking, I know we was doing our little show, little talk and everything. Somebody did have a question. They wanted to know from you, what is Kalaparusha?
Good question. We can do a little pre-show kind of question Q&A real quick. We'll do that. So, Kalaparusha is basically, it's would be termed, to really kind of unpack it in a proper way, how the Supreme Being is personified as time, right? And when you say personified, meaning to make it a person, right? Or in likeness of a personage. And so Kalaparusha, Kala, first word, stands for time, literally, right? But Purusha, right, you could say is man, but it's really what it is almost consciousness in man, right? And so to go deeper into really what Kalaparusha is, it's almost symbolized as each sign is related to the body part of the Supreme Being. So the Aries would be the head, right, of the Kalaparusha. Taurus would be the neck, right, of Kalaparusha. Gemini would be the arms and shoulders and hands of Kalaparusha, and so forth. And so each one of these, when we understand it, it becomes, there's another way of saying it is, it's called the cosmic man, right?
Yeah.
Because we're the microcosm that is inside of the macrocosm, which is Kalaparusha. So Kalaparusha, in essence, is how the Supreme Being unfolds itself in time in regards to man, if that makes sense.
It does. You know, go ahead. You was about to say something else?
No, right.
Okay. So when you were saying that, you know, one of the reasons why I like the North Indian style chart is because you can kind of see that breakdown you were going through. It looks like a person to me.
It does.
When I look at the way how the chart's laid out.
You can see the first house is the head. Second house would be, the face, right? The teeth, right? The neck, the ears, right? The five senses in general, right? Most people don't know. If I want to know someone's senses, have keen senses, the second house, second lord, or anything that's related to it can denote senses, right? Because, taste, touch, smell, right? And hearing are all within the second house. So second house is all kinds of things. But in essence, right, that's why we can see it in such a way, because as above, so below. You're the microcosm, right? You're the fractal, right, of the cosmic man. It's just folded in on itself so many times so that it has a pattern in such that those patterns are revealed through how the planets move in the heavens, right? So literally, like, you're looking at the reflection of yourself as God on earth. If you really want to understand what Kalaparusha is all about, how can I see myself as the Supreme Being unfolding itself in time?
Indeed. So I remember somebody did, ask me that. So I kept forgetting to ask you. So, definitely appreciate you giving the people that breakdown. Indeed.
No doubt.
Piggybacking off of last episode, a lot of people really, we got some real good feedback for that for that show. I mean, it was I think it's one of our best foundational shows. Just the way how it was laid out, and I know a lot of people that really had a deep respect, a deeper respect for astrology after that show. How do you feel about that show, Brother Rob?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback. A lot. People said it. Now they see that astrology is not just something that is kind of contrived. It actually really is about patterns. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you read books, I know you remember the book that Suss recommended on cycles. Was it Dewey?
Yeah, Dewey.
Yeah.
Dewey is one.
Yeah, Dewey. Yeah.
Nikolai Kondratev.
Yeah. Well,
He's another one.
it's just studying time. Right. And these planets have a mechanized kind of way of keeping that time. In fact, most people don't know that Venus is actually almost as close to the best timekeeping device other than a computer. Seriously. The Mayans used in their astrology, Venus was a major factor. And so
Yeah.
literally you can time Venus like a metatonic clock. Right? It's that accurate. Right? So, I mean, are you studying his time? That's what we
Yeah.
just mentioned, Kala, Purusha, right? How time unfolds in regards to man's consciousness. Because animals are not going to perceive this. Lions are not going to perceive this, right? Only man, right?
Yeah.
Which is reflecting with reflection of the supreme being can see these patterns. And so we're just reading patterns in time and space.
Indeed. And I think that's a good springboard to, launch us right into today's topic. So we can hit on, what do you do at that time?
Most of us right now. Like having a good relationship with time, right? Right.
Indeed.
And definitely time is what people have right now, if anything. So I guarantee you, though, in a lifetime, most of us are going to have one thing that we feel can kind of guarantee our future existence, and that's children.
Yeah.
And that's what today's topic is really going to be centered around, is understanding how children are seen, and kind of purviewed from an astrological lens, through an astrological lens. We kind of talked about it a little bit last week, and that's why we're kind of taking it here this week and understanding, we talked about those cycles that reveal, the pattern and development of man's consciousness. And when Mars opposes itself, squares itself, and so forth. And, the other planets do the same thing. This is development of man's consciousness. And the funny thing is, was watching something on video on YouTube, and YouTube is a very interesting land because everything is truncated, right? Everything is piecemealed, and you try to get these pieces, you try to see the whole, and it just doesn't work. If it works for you, I'm not knocking it, but from my level of study, it doesn't. YouTube serves to be very entertaining at best. But they had a show, a video on there about the reticular activating system, the RAS. And they talked about how first of all, what the RAS does, the reticular activating system does, is it's a filter for consciousness, right? Your senses pick up far more than you're aware. Right, there's much more going on externally and internally, and if all these things were recorded on consciousness at once, you wouldn't be able to literally do anything. In fact, you probably die from overexposure of things. Right, you go into shock, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to blunt that, right, the reticular activating system is in play. And meditation learns to gradually refine the layers, remove the layers of the reticular activating system based on the methodology of the meditation system, if it's proper. But nonetheless, back to the RAS, right? So the lady was saying on here, oh, how you can change your reticular activating system to do all these different things. And I find it entertaining that you you never questioned, ask why the filters are there in the first place, and who put them there, and why they were put there. Not only why, but what are the implications of changing changing that filter of consciousness. And so it goes to show that that focus, right? That concentrating of consciousness, right, is all by grand design so that you can have an experience, what we call life, right? Well, the fifth house, right, is a house that literally talks about intelligence, right? That's one of the things that it talks about in regards to the fifth house. If I want to see someone's intelligence, right, not how smart they are, folks, there's a difference between being smart and intelligent, two different things, right? Dogs are smart, crows are smart. Most crows are just as smart as a 2 or 3-year-old. Most people don't know that, right? So, right, just because you can repeat a lot of words and you have a lot of ideas in your head and you can articulate yourself, that's smart. Intelligence is how you use it, how you apply it. And can you learn from other people's mistakes? Can you go through life and apply different levels of thinking at different times, which is intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Not just linear left brain Cartesian syllogistic logic, right?
Yeah.
Right. So intelligence, right, is kind of the gift that man has, right, that is on par with the supreme being. Would you agree?
I agree with that.
Right. Because your intelligence is the ability to mitigate all of your life, right, in regards to navigating it and putting it in a proper perspective. Some call it circumspection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some call it delayed gratification, right? Right, because right, that light, that intelligence gives you the ability to say, well, maybe I shouldn't use those words right now. Maybe I should be silent. Maybe I should listen. Maybe I should do something other than the normal route or response of what I'm going to do in order to elicit a different response. Right. So, right, because if you're used to using the gift of gab, guess what? You may have a great literary palette and you've read and can say all kind of different things, but right, did you really use intelligence behind it? Did you use something of a higher nature, right, to guide that which is innately in you? And so that is the gift that is given to man, from him to separate himself from what we consider kind of your lower nature. Right? We call it your soul. Right? And the soul has a very specific connection to the fifth house, because see, when we have children, these are souls, right? They're souls. They're coming through you, right? But they're a soul, right? And like we say soul, like, well, what is that? Like, how do people say that's like a religious word? Well, not really, right? Because if you understand that man has a consciousness and that man is beginning to realize, scientifically speaking, that consciousness goes far beyond the physical, tangible realm that we can see, smell, taste, and touch. He's realizing that now.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a study you can find, if you can find it. There was a scientist by the name of Johann Gradsky. And Johann Gradsky studied the nature of electrons. And so he actually learned how to capture electrons and begin to study their nature and behavior in an isolated way, right, per electron. So he performed an experiment and took an electron and isolated it and fired it. He fired it at an atomically impenetrable wall. Well, when the actual electron reached the wall, right, and an electron, folks, is a particle that has hardly any mass, meaning no physical presence at all. but the electron reached the wall and stopped, right? Changed directions, and he had made an incision on the other side up and to the right, where the original place where he fired the electron, where the electron stopped, changed, went direction, went up and through the actual hole, and meaning, in other words, it had the ability to interpret its surroundings and change course in order to avert destruction. That means that consciousness is on the level of an electron.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it has a very robotic, pre-described, predetermined means of action, it's limited, but each creature allows for that consciousness to express itself in a much grander and a much more refined and a much more interactive way. So from the electron all the way to man, consciousness is still the undergirding reality. And so when you realize that you are a being that is consciousness having some type of realization of itself and experiencing, then they say you're woke, quote unquote, right? It's kind of a strange word because you're always woke. You're never not woke if you think about it. Even when you're asleep, you're still woke. Right? So kind of relative term, but nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Right. When you understand consciousness, right, and how powerful intelligence is relating to that, then you understand why we look at the fifth house as the most essential house of a chart. It is the most essential, more than any other house. Because once I know your intelligence level, not your IQ, not that, right? Your true intelligence, right? Then I can see, guess what I can begin to see? I begin to see the choices that you make. Or do you make choices? Even further said. Because consciousness, is the substratum, and what is in between your thoughts is still that same consciousness. So if the more space you put in between those thoughts, the more breadth of consciousness you have, and then therefore the more intelligence you have. And the fifth house is what is called a spiritual house. 1, 5, and 9 are the spiritual houses. They're called the trikona or the dharma houses. Dharma means purpose. You can't have purpose without focus, and usually without intelligence, there's no purpose, no focus. So these things begin to unravel, like why are children, right? Why are we looking at children through the fifth house? Why is there a connection? That's how we begin to see that there's something inherent in our children and in what's going on through our own consciousness, through our own ability to focus, through our own innate ability to understand who and what we are. See, whenever you have a strong fifth house, a person automatically comes to earth generally knowing what they're supposed to do. Right? So by extension, when you know what you're here to do, then you have the propensity, right, to choose things in a different way.
Yeah.
Children don't come by accident. You think they do. They said, "Oh, I got pregnant by accident." No, you did. No, it's no such a thing, right? Right. When you got to think about the odds. When the sperm meets the ovum, right? The odds are you're here by 1,000,000 to 1 odds. See, we take it for granted because there's 1,000,000 billion people here, so we kind of stop. No, you are here by 1,000,000 to 1 shot. Meaning that specific combination specifically made you. That's why when you have siblings by the same person, they come out different. Even though they have some similarities, they're different, right? Because there's a consciousness. There was a matrix that was inherent, right, in that ovum and sperm interaction. which produced the necessary vehicle to harbor that soul so it can learn the necessary lessons through the family, through the lineage, through all of that. We can see all of that through the destiny, through the chart. Siblings are seen through the 3rd and the 11th house. So literally, right, when you're born, that soul incarnates, right? The next line from you has already been predetermined. Pretty much. Because your propensities, right, are already in the chart. It takes a great deal of effort to overcome those propensities. It can be done, and it has been done, but it takes a great deal of spiritual ability to overcome what you call your destiny, to change the course of it. So it's not likely to happen. 90% of the world doesn't even know that it's possible. So, and I say it's possible in the sense of when you get to that level, it's a whole different understanding of life in the first place. So yeah, it can change, but your perception has changed as well. So you're not living a life like a normal, what we call everyday average person. So the context of the conversation is null and void anyway. But back to what we all experience for the most part, right? When you have a child, right? Think about what goes into getting to that child. You had to attract someone, or you were attracted to someone. If you use your intelligence, you chose what?
Chose well. Yeah.
Well, guess what? The 5th house, right, is the gain, right, from the marriage, which is the 7th house. If you count to the 5th house, it's 11 houses away. So that means, and the 11th house is the natural 11th house is what is termed as the house of gains. So literally, the gains that you get are from how you choose your mate.
Yeah.
Right? But if you chose because you have intelligence, which denotes the 5th house, right, then there's a obvious symbiotic interconnection between the two. So then we understand that now, oh, well, when you have children, right, these children are born from your consciousness. They're literally a receipt of your inner workings. You ever see someone's children that just disruly?
Oh yeah.
Well, bet your bottom dollar. My grandma used to always say, baby, the apple don't fall too far from the tree now. Like, oh, I get it, right?
Yeah.
There's always exceptions to the rule. But for them, and this always can be seen to the chart as well. But for the most part, right, you'll still see, right, that there is some affinity between the parent, of course, and the child, both parents. So now we understand that the consciousness of a being, right, is always at work, whether it's developed or undeveloped. If it's undeveloped, you make poor choices. Poor choices denote poor mates. Poor mates denote poor mating habits, and poor mating habits denote children that usually come through with a karmic debt that has already been pre-prescribed from the parents that already carried the debt in the first place.
Yeah, that's deep.
Right, so the 5th house, right, when we talk about children, well, the 5th house talks about what we call past life credit.
Yeah.
Now, what we just like, these are like kind of like coin terms, if you will, right? What it means is, first of all, and let's talk about a little astrology for a sidebar, quick second. So the 5th house is akin to the 5th sign, right? I said akin to, not the same. They're similar. They have a relation to one another. But the 5th sign is Leo. And the natural ruler, the planet that governs, rules, or controls Leo, is the sun.
Yeah.
So the sun, right, in astrology can be read as what is called the Atma, or the soul. Right? Now, Atma is really a better term. We also call it the Ba in Quebec, right? It's the Atma, right, in um, in Santana Dharma terms or Hindu terms, right? Indian terms. It's called the Atma, right? And in fact, it still has a connection to Atum, which is in Kemet. That's a whole nother story. But the Atma, right, is the being that is inherently within and behind all other beings, right? So the soul is what we're talking about. The thing that exists beyond physical, beyond space and time, beyond, right, from that carries you from life to life, right? It's the thread of consciousness in which the lives our lives are beaded upon. That's what your soul is. Even when people say, "What is it?" It's a thread of consciousness in which, upon which, right, the beads of your lives are strung upon. So each life becomes a bead, but that consciousness is the string that strings them all together. That means that's the thing. That's the awareness behind the reticular activating system, right? That you can go behind that and then witness what comes up through the reticular activating system and goes down as well when you begin to meditate properly. Right. So that's what your soul is, right? It performs as your conscience, also the fifth house. Right? I can see your conscience. Do you have a conscience? Do you care about what you're doing? Do you use your conscience in a way that might be detrimental towards others? That can be seen through the fifth house. Right? So, literally, the soul, or the Atma, or the consciousness that links us from one existence to the next, right, is seen through the sun in a chart. Right? And the sun being the natural ruler of Leo, which is akin to the fifth sign, which connects it right to the fifth house. Then we know why when we say the fifth house is the house of Purva Punya, or past life credit, because we can see if there's a planet there, how your past lives were pretty much kind of lived for the general most part all the way up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that provides you gifts. So I guess let me explain to you what I mean in more depth, and then we'll tie it right back to children. So someone that does something of greatness, right, requires focus. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That's the main recipe.
So if you're a great musician, you require great focus, right?
Yeah.
If you're a great teacher, you require great focus, because you have to study, right, across vast areas and genres of information, right?
Yeah.
If you're a great athlete, right, requires great focus, right? If you're a great whatever it is that you do, and I'm saying great as in the sense of elevating you above the common man in the gifts or the area of expertise that you focus upon. The gifts that you're given to and the area of expertise that you focus upon yields your gifts, and your gifts, if they're elevated to a high level, right, requires great focus, therefore giving you the ability to carry that through to the next life, if that makes sense to you. And usually people of those caliber and of those degrees are very meritorious or very conscientious in their actions, habits, and behaviors. Does that bring the fifth house a little bit more to understanding of why we look at it from a past life perspective, as far as your karma and what you kind of bring with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you've done that enough in a past life, let's say if you're a great mathematician, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually seen through the 11th house, Mercury, certain combinations, and also the fifth house as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, the essence of the fifth, well, let's talk about it. The essence of the fifth house is to create, right?
Yeah.
But remember, if you focused all these different past lifetimes on, let's say, math or science or construction, architecture, whatever it is, right? that consciousness has been imprinted, right? That bead has made a very impactful weight on the string of consciousness. So guess what happens? The next life, you what? Boom, right? Have those gifts, which we call purva punya. Jupiter in the fifth house, right? You are very close to the supreme being in many regards, provided Jupiter is fairly placed fairly well.
Yeah.
Right. So you focused on God or the supreme being or religion to a maximal level in the past life. Right. So, and there's other things that can go along. There's other things you can denote from that. But all of these to be said is what is being said is that in essence, right, all those gifts come through and then they push through and they have the drive or need to create something on this physical plane. Well, in order to do that, right, there's several ways we can do that. Physically speaking, it's children. But the children are usually, because they're purva punya, which is the fifth house, are born with the gifts of the parents many times. And then sometimes it might skip a generation, but guess what? It's still from the same line.
Yeah.
Now, does that make sense a little bit more? Why that light, that consciousness comes through and says, well, this being will come through you because you fixated your consciousness, your light in such a way that this being now has to filter through you in order to achieve similar goals in its own destiny.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It's like, you know, you got a certain thing that you need to do in the incarnation and you need the right, you need the right vehicle to go through, the right, right set of experiences to actually be able to manifest that.
Absolutely. And so the fifth house is how we see if you're born with those sets of experiences that are gifted to you. So let's put it to you like this. Usually, right, 75-80% of the time, Mercury's in the fifth house, the person is born with a child that is very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up. I've seen it over and over. Like the child is pretty smart. Now, of course, the father also has some propensity, right? But if I see through the mother, she has Mercury in the fifth, I know she herself is going to be impactful to that child through Mercury in the fifth because she herself brings those gifts. I see through the father's chart as well, though. Let's say he has Saturn. Let's say he has Saturn in the fifth, right? It's still going to be, right? The mother's going to have that impact and the father's going to have an impact based on how Saturn is placed as well. But you read them kind of a composite and then you read the person's chart to see what the composite looks like. Right? Like my mother has Sun in the fifth house. I have Jupiter in the fifth house. So, right, and when you read the chart, well, guess what? Through my mother, right, I'm her only child. I have children on my father's side. I have brothers and sisters on my father's side. But on my mother's side, well, in her chart, Sun is in the fifth house. Anytime you see Sun in the fifth house, usually the chart person has one child. I'm like, wow. And you see it over and over and over. When you natively have Sun in the fifth house many times, right, it can cause, right, you to have one child. Why?
It's interesting.
Talk about why. So the Sun, right, is, when we talked about, it's the Atma, right?
Yeah, it's the focus.
It's focus, right? It's concentration. It's things that are, right? That's what the sun is. It's just concentrated gas, right? To a point where it didn't ignite, but it set itself into what we call fusion, right? Or it's a fusion chamber, right? So it combusted enough to, I won't say ignite, but if you will, to become alive, right? And then it's self-born, right? So the sun, that's why we use the sun as the symbol for the soul, because it's self-born. Right? Nothing came and turned it on. It turned on from within.
Yeah.
So when you understand that from an astronomical perspective, right, the astrological perspective means that it's that part of us that when we turn it on, right, we become self-aware, we become light, right, we project light, right. The sun is the greatest teacher, just like actually the sun is the light in and of itself. It represents the ability to shine. It represents the ability to impart light to others, right. So when you understand that sun is hot in and of itself in the fifth house, even though it's light, it's not gonna stop the children because it's light. It's not gonna stop them all the way, but it's hot enough or concentrated enough or focused enough to where it only allows that one being through. Right? It's just when you begin to understand how it works, it's phenomenal. Right? Each planet in the fifth house is a very different twist on how children manifest themselves in a person's chart. And you want to usually see if a person has something in the fifth house that gives you an understanding that they do have the innate, and not everyone has it. Everyone has something that they've come to do because everyone has a fifth lord. The fifth lord can be extremely well placed, even though there's no planet in the fifth house. I don't want people to start looking at their chart and start saying, wait a minute, I don't have anything in the fifth house, brother. No. Right? Everyone has, right? Just because you don't have a planet in the fifth house doesn't mean it's not activated and doing things in the chart, and you don't come with gifts and all those things. That's not what I mean. I mean that in order to understand if someone has like an innate propensity, right, for things of a nature based on whatever talent it is, you look to the fifth house. Because it's where it's literally the intelligence that we have. And so it kind of shines through. That's like the sun, the planet, the sun. It's something that shines through with a person. You don't even have to say it, it's just their gift. Well, a child is a gift too. They carry the same propensities, and they have the ability to carry on to facilitate your essence beyond yourself. Right? That one child, you can have one person that can change the world. It takes one. Right? So understanding that need, that urge to manifest something beyond ourselves is the fifth house. And some people might say, what about the 10th house? I thought that was career. No. 10th house is not career per se, right? 10th house is the height of your existence. It's the pinnacle of what it is that you are here to do. But you're here to do other things within the context of that as well. So the fifth house always shows us if someone has that propensity to do something that is going to exist beyond themselves in this plane, whether it be physically through children or mentally through works of art, right? Through literary works, right? Many times you'll see that people with the fifth house damaged by a malefic planet, it's only damaged in the physical plane, but in the mental plane, they're high thinkers, they're deep philosophers, they're profound conceptualists, meaning that they can come up with ideas and different. It's the fifth house is a very powerful house. So just because someone might be shut down in the physical plane from having children, they many times will produce something on the mental plane that will outlast themselves from a very long time. And I don't have any, I should have pulled some charts to kind of support this, but the kind of individuals I'm speaking about is Shakespeare, right? Mozart, right? Go check their charts and see if something's going on tight with the fifth house. I can guarantee you I put my money on it, you're going to see it. Right? I put my money on it, right? So, and Shakespeare, some people say is not even a real person. They say he's Right, Sir Francis Bacon. That's a whole nother story, right? But Sir Francis Bacon story, Sir Francis Bacon chart, I have seen, and that fifth house is lit up, right? So you know what I mean? Like there's certain things when you just begin to study it on a general level, you just look at very general things and you see these things very quickly, right? So when you look at a person's child and say, "Oh, that child is bright," why would you say bright? What planet would we indicate this bright? The sun, right? Which is the natural ruler of the fifth sign, which again connects it to the fifth house, because the fifth house is that connection. It makes you bright, intelligent, right? All around, right? And usually that brightness and intelligence denotes compassion. They go usually hand in hand, right? Now, what if there's a malefic? That person still may very well be, let's say if Mars is the propensity that the person brings through the fifth house, and they have a very strong Mars in that placement, Mars can very much be military science. Right? That person was a general or a high level military leader in some past existence, very recently, usually. And so that person can now bring those gifts with them, right? In the means of national defense, of self-defense, of whatever it is that militaristic or martially you're trying to apply it to. Right? So, and they still may be very much compassionate. They just may not be a nice person. Right? They're there to protect, right? They're not there to, cuddle and console. They're there to protect. So, you know what I mean? But guess what? On the physical plane, though, that kind of it reduces, right, the chance or probability for children to come through in an easy way. Right.
I think we might have a long time ago might have even looked at this chart. I'm sure you have it. Mother Teresa.
Right. What's her chart? What's her fifth house going on with it? What's going on with it?
She got Saturn and Moon in there. Moon is the eighth lord. She's Sag ascendant.
Right. So no children. Right. And it's debilitated.
Yep.
Right? So knowing that it's debilitated, that person doesn't have the propensity, right, to produce physical life on this plane. But where's the fifth lord? I bet you it shows exactly what I'm about to tell you.
It's in the ninth.
Rest my case. Right, because the ninth house is the fifth from the fifth. The ninth house is, right, the house of what you would say is related to as the supreme being, right? So that just elucidated exactly what, right? Thank you, brother. Thank you. Right. I mean, I don't have to necessarily look at a chart to know this is always going to come out dead ringer every time.
Yeah.
Right. That's the faith that I have in a system that works. Right. Not blind faith. Right.
Nope.
But that just shows it. This person's not gonna have children in this physical plane, but the person's connection to the supreme being is that in which the person's going to produce, and they're a Sag ascendant, they're going to produce, right, that need to disseminate, right, the connection to the Most High, right, by way of sacrifice, by way of denying their own ability to produce something on this realm. That what they produced was that which was, because her name now has an established, right? When you say that compassion, you kind of, I'm going to say, not from those from the older generation, you would think of Mother Teresa. I mean, she kind of, her name goes with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's still alive. Her consciousness is, whenever you speak someone's name, their consciousness rings them, that renders them there, or renders them accessible. That's why you call upon the name of your ancestors. Right? So, right, that's why the Ren in in the Kemetic tradition is a part of your spirit.
Yeah.
Right. And you have different names to fit different parts of your spirit, but nonetheless. So understanding what we've just talked about, right, and using Mother Teresa as kind of a segue to really talk about that. Now, let's talk about Jupiter in the 5th house. Let's talk about children and the planets that kind of impact that 5th house and what it just generally will look like real quick, right? So we talked about the sun, right? The moon in the 5th house, generally, that person is going to be very creative in the sense of artistry, in the sense of music. Usually moon and music have a very strong connection in astrology. Venus too, right? But the moon is the feeling and the mood of something, and they like to constantly be in this mood, so they're thinking, and they have a very powerful memory. Well, I think we can call upon somebody to prove that point. And guess what type of, in fact, astrology is so beautiful. I can just pull some out random and just show you, right? So do you remember there was a chart we did with a brother with the moon in the 5th house? Oh, half brother, but he's still a brother. Good old, dear old Barack Obama.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Remember moon's in the 5th? Brother has a very powerful memory. Right? Not only that, but the type of children it's going to produce is what? Female children.
Yeah.
And he has girls.
Yep. 2 girls.
Right? Just like the sun will produce one boy. Or one child that is very independent, of course. Right? Could be a female too. Are you seeing this? Like this is, but think about the mind of this individual, and it's exalted, right?
Yep.
So this brother has a very powerful mind, right? His mental capacity is much tied in with his intelligence. He has a very strong intelligence through the ability to harness and harbor things in his consciousness, in his subconsciousness. He can retain things. That's the power of the moon in the 5th. Right, because he's not like musical type guy, right? He's not someone that we consider musically oriented.
Yeah,
but he has a very powerful mind in the sense that the retentive power of what he has and what he did with that retentive power shows the intelligence. He applied it very well.
Yeah,
in an exalted way. You see what I mean? That's what we mean, right? And we'll do one more. We're not going to do them all. I thought about it. We're not going to do them all because we'll do that some other time. We'll kind of do maybe a planetary type a show on each house maybe someday in the future, right? We'll kind of run through that. But
we got a billion shows to do.
Got lots of shows to do, folks. So stay tuned. This will keep you tuned in, right? So, right, little carrot trick for you. But nonetheless, right, let's pick another planet. Let's do a malefic, a real harsh one. Let's do K2. Right.
Whew. Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. K2's hard.
Right. Yeah, K2. So usually, now remember, right, for a male and female, this is going to be different, folks. And we're going to talk about female kind of stuff in another show coming up very soon, right? More than likely, the next show we'll see, right? But female horoscopy is different from male horoscopy. We read it differently.
Yeah.
Right? It's not read the exact same way, right? In Western sense, maybe so. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not a Western adept. I studied it for about a year and saw it didn't work, so I moved on. Not for me anyway. But anyway.
Yeah.
So when we look at a chart, right? Remember I talked about a couple of words in the beginning. We said the 5th house is the womb, right? If I didn't mention that, there's a couple of words associated with it. It's the womb and also an umbrella, right? Which is the 5th house. And that directly ties to children, right? other things as well, because anytime you're learning something astrologically, it can be applied on multiple levels and multiple layers. Right? The same thing. So for a woman with fifth house K2 in the fifth house, right, it's a very challenging situation. Many times, right, wherever K2 is placed, it creates something as what is called, it's permeable, aurically speaking. It's aurically permeable, meaning that it renders that particular part of that person's being with holes that can be kind of that can allow things to come through, right? And so the womb is a place that needs to be tight, because the fifth house for a woman specifically is her womb.
Yeah.
Right? The seventh house is, yes, her womb too. Yes. Most people say, well, what about it? The other seventh house is sexual organs and internal sexual organs. Yes, it is. Yes. However, where it sits is the fifth house. It sits in the abdominal cavity. And the fifth house is the abdomen, in the sense of Kala Purusha, right? Great that someone asked that question and you posed it. Awesome that you did that, because then we can use that to tie it right back to understanding. When we look at a chart and see the fifth house for a woman, it's literally her womb. The abdominal kind of setup, so that, you know, wherever she holds in there is going to be okay. Because remember, the woman's belly swells.
Yeah.
It doesn't just stay in that little small, it gets huge. And so that fifth house is that pregnant, that whenever you see a woman pregnant, that's the fifth house.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If I want to see how a woman's pregnancy is going to be, fifth house. So with K2 there, right, from one, it may be very challenging to conceive.
Yeah.
Why? Well, the past life, right, has some things that have kind of put you in a space where you've already been there, done that kind of deal. So it detaches you from the real need to have children. But the strange thing is that at the same time, the person has such a propensity, a memory of having children, they usually have a very kind of a love-hate relationship with their children when they manifest.
Yeah.
It's very hard for someone, especially a woman with K2 in the fifth, to conceive many times. And when she does, usually there is an ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is just because that person comes through this life to experience that I want to take you from here and put you into a social atmosphere, to a place where you learn social skills, right? Where you learn to come out of, right, being in the internal sense of things to the external. The 11th house is a very externalized house. Friends, social networking, learning people skills, right? Mm-hmm. That's 11th house, right? Learning to have long-term goals, fulfill those goals, right? Right? You can't do that with children. Most people don't. I mean, it's very hard to do, rather, in the grand sense of the grand scheme of things. When you're focused on children, usually you're a homemaker, right?
Yeah.
But this time, I want you out of that. I want you into the realm of the will and deal, right? Into the hustle and bustle, if you will, right? Socializing, mingling, right? Connecting, building. That's all 11th house. So this person is being called out, right? But they have usually a strong connection, because the fifth house is a house that connects you to the past life. So the lingering of that creates that separation, and it opens that person up. So when the seed comes, it literally usually doesn't stay very long. Right, and so they have to do usually measures and things that go beyond that circumvent that, and they do have a child, but the first child still has to fulfill the mandate of the fifth house, right?
Yeah.
And so that first child filling the fifth house mandate usually is a child that is challenged. I'm serious. I watched it right firsthand. So when the child comes out challenged, they usually come out They come out autistic, savants, ADHD, some type of disorder. Sometimes even physically so, handicapped many times. Because that fifth house has the propensity to carry you to understand, right, that this life on that level is not commensurate with physical comfort or physical pliability. It's there to be a challenge so that you detach. When you're done, you will detach. And you will then look to the 11th house. You will look to social networks, clubs, growing organizations, right? Putting yourself into the mix of life itself, right?
Yeah.
Because then you'll let go. That's how life teaches you its lessons. Because it says, look, when you're done with this, you will still love your child, but you've had your fill this life, right? Rahu's the opposite, and we won't get into Rahu in the fifth, right? But just know, right, that need or desire, want to have children to that next level, or to produce something beyond yourself of greatness, or to have something exist of yourself beyond your physical life, right, becomes an insatiable desire. But there's also the flip switch on that too, right? Because Ketu and Rahu do flips. They invert reality. They do, right? They invert reality. They change reality, right? They cause things to shift, right? As you can well see in this day and age, right? So, right, understanding that, that fifth house is literally the go-to and the drive-in, like that's, you just drive into that and start unpacking it very quickly. You see the person and their children, their intelligence, their propensity to produce things on a higher level, right? Because they're all interconnected, right? The children usually have those same gifts as well, right? Child comes out very much just like the parent, and the child many times in ancient times, in fact, would carry on the lineage of the parent, in carrying on the traditions and the work and the skill set and the craft and so forth. That's usually with the natural ancient order of things. And that's kind of like what the fifth house kind of denotes. I mean, the fifth house is much more than this, y'all, right? But when it comes to, let's say, what we talked about, the umbrella, remember, as you age and you get to a certain level, if you've invested consciousness into your children wisely enough, if you invested into your children wisely enough and use that consciousness and those gifts, then when you do become older, they become an umbrella. They become your shelter, right? They can protect you. So, right, when you neglect it, well, then therein usually lies the opposite effect. So, nonetheless, right, these things are kind of inside of the fifth house, right? The fifth house is much more than that. But we're talking about children and understanding how do children connect through the chart, through the fifth house. Now, the planet that we look to is Jupiter.
Yeah.
Right. If there's a connection, strong connection, or, well, let's say aspect from Jupiter to the fifth house, that person's children are phenomenal. They usually have very phenomenal children, right? When I say phenomenal, they're phenoms. They're people that excel, right? When Jupiter aspects the fifth house, because Jupiter is the Karaka or significator or indicator, right, of children in a chart.
Yeah.
Jupiter is the Karaka for the 5th house. I guess we'll give the people one more, right? We'll talk about Jupiter in the 5th, right? So Jupiter in the 5th, there's a statement that says when a planet when a Karaka is placed in its own house, it becomes a bad thing, right? Kind of real quick, right? So Mars, right, in the 3rd, kind of so, right? Right. Venus in the 7th, kind of so, right? Too much. Sun in the 9th, because the Sun is a Karaka of the 9th. Venus is a Karaka of the 7th. Mars is Karaka of the 3rd. Right. So it's too much of that thing in that house. What does that really mean? You think like they have all these old statements and you have to figure it out. Like what? And thankfully I've had some pretty good, instructors and teachers and gurus, but sometimes it's still not made ready plain until you study deep enough, and then it makes sense. So whenever you have a planet, let's say, we got to talk about Jupiter. I don't want to take us out of the scope of children, but Jupiter in the 5th house, Jupiter produces, right? They say it's not good, right? It's not healthy to have the Karaka, the planet that signifies that house, in that house. Well, Jupiter signifies the 5th house. It literally indicates children. So you would think that Jupiter in the 5th would be naturally positive. But there's an old mathematical statement that says, right, sometimes relatively speaking, right, 2 positives don't always equal the next. It does mathematically speaking, yes, but just like 2 negatives equal a positive, the same thing. Too much of something can be a negative, right? So Jupiter produces high-mindedness. It has the propensity to literally elevate that person into spiritual sciences, bar none. Right? So they come with that gift. They come with the gift of having the ability to foresee the future, which is the 5th house as well. So they get all these gifts, but they have so much investment in higher knowledge, there's something that suffers. The children. Yeah. And so you can't serve 2 masters, right? It's very difficult to have a very high-minded, right, philosophical, spiritually oriented type career, and at the same time facilitate children on a hands-on level on a constant basis, right? Because both require inordinate amounts of time. So when you have Jupiter in the 5th, not aspecting the 5th, it does produce a separation between the two, between the parent and the child. But the children come out very intelligent, right? So they almost come out self-sufficient to some degree. So they themselves carry on some of the propensities of Jupiter in the 5th. Does it make sense? Because the father innately, or the mother innately, has the propensity to be a high thinker. Already, the child comes in through that level, and because the person's usually in that field or that activity of life, the child has to have something that would at least help it produce or grow fast enough to keep up with the lack of the parental influence in the first place. Yeah. It's a give and take.
Right. Makes sense. I know quite a few people with that, and I can see that.
Very good children, but they're not. The bond is not like glue, right? It's like they're there. I'm here. They're taken care of. They're supported. They have what they need. They're getting education, right? And usually children are very educated. You just see it, but the relationship between the parent and child is not commensurate with what you would consider as a loving parent-child, because the parent is, again, absolved into higher order things. So that's many times when you begin to understand, oh, now I see why too much of one thing is not good.
Yeah.
Because it creates this different relationship between the intent of that thing being overkill, having overkill in that area. So just Venus in the 7th house does the same thing. Right? People say, oh, you would want Venus in the 7th house. Not really. Not really. I've seen it over and over. Right? And we won't get into it, but just remember, Venus is looking back up on the ascendant from the 7th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So nonetheless, right, that's just kind of a quick way we understand, how to look at the relationship between, really what children are and what they're viewed, what they are, and how they're viewed through the context of astrology. Why they come through that particular area and vector of the 5th house, and Jupiter as well, because Jupiter, of course, is the indicator of high intelligence, of knowledge, but also of growth, expansion, and that's what again that those children represent as well. In ancient times, when you had a lot of children, you had a lot of wealth, right? Because Jupiter is also wealth, and Jupiter also means that the children can all. Jupiter being in a very substantial place in the chart means that in ancient times you had enough people to work what you had going on. If you had land, right, you had people to work. If you have a business, you have somebody to operate it, right? It was considered wealth in ancient times, right? Now children are more of an asset. It seems, a liability now just seems an asset. But nonetheless, that's just the days and times we live in. Yeah. But for the most part, right, that's why you understand that all these kind of inner meanings, inner connections, right, between why Jupiter represents wealth, Jupiter represents children, Jupiter represents knowledge, right? It represents expansion of consciousness, right? And the 5th house does just that. It does the exact same thing. Right, produces children, expands your consciousness. Right.
I came across something real interesting the other day. I was watching a Nova show on called Planets. It came out like last year, I think. Mm-hmm. And they was talking about the creation of our solar system, right? Mm-hmm. So just to kind of brief it up a little bit, the way how you talked about the sun, and then you talked about Jupiter, right? Mm-hmm. The first two planets, or you had the sun that came through first. Jupiter was the next one, mm-hmm. and Jupiter is the second, second planet that gives the most gravitational pull, second to the sun.
That's right.
And Jupiter threw a asteroid into the earth that enabled the earth's waters to become what they are today, from being acidic oceans to being something that is a bringer of life.
Man, look, man, if I really get into it, brother, about the whole way, if we really did, people say, oh, that's kind of reaching. When I start talking about the science behind what we practice in astronomy and how we use it astrologically, you cannot deny that Jupiter, it has certain roles in regards to what it does in the solar system and how it reads astrologically. It works perfectly. So Jupiter being the largest planet and its magnetic, the magnetic field around Jupiter is 10 times its size. Mm-hmm. So that means you would be able to see it from the Earth at night, almost like the moon. It'd be that large. That's how big its magnetic field is. So, we can get into it, right? But nonetheless, right, you're absolutely right. All those planetary things have a direct propensity and connection to the astronomy. Is the astrology. That's what you're studying. You're just studying a right brain expression of it on the astrological side, and a left brain expression of it on the astronomical side. Same thing.
Indeed, we got to get an astronomer on here one day. I'm looking for him. I'm trying to find one.
We do. We definitely do. So that really it shows, right, that as above, so below. What we're studying literally is how to read, right? How to unpack how the Supreme Being manifests itself in every single life on this planet, no matter how small, or how seemingly insignificant, right? That string of consciousness, that piece that the Supreme Being gives us of itself to literally go through life, to be able to have these experiences and to repeat it, provided that we need to repeat it, or to move on, provided we can move on. Understanding how that ties into the children tie into all of those things. The astrology and the astronomy literally speak to the fact that you are a being that is going to exist outside of this space and time, and you're going to reincarnate. That's the only way astrology could be valid, if reincarnation is real. And if children are born, and we know they're born through parents that have certain propensities, and then so forth and so forth and so forth, all the way down, and then they birth children that have certain propensities, right? That means that astrology in and of itself, right, is a science that can study those karmic propensities all the way through down to the nth degree. I can see your children's children, right? And I can see your forefathers through your chart. That's why it's so potent to understand how when we look at a chart, the most important thing you do, if you know what you're doing, is to look to the 5th house. You automatically will know almost about 40 to 50% of how the person is going to manifest their destiny in this given life. Because you'll know generally the patterns of consciousness. All the other ones, yes, they do the same thing. But the 5th house shows literally how you are going to come into this world and use your intelligence. Children are a byproduct of intelligence. If you lack intelligence, you will choose improperly and usually mate with someone that will give a karmic debt that is more than you probably would want to bear. That's why we use this science. It's not personal, right? It's not saying that someone Mars in the 5th house you shouldn't be married to, right? It's not saying that. It's not saying with someone Saturn in the 5th house or Saturn conjunct the 5th lord, right? I shouldn't marry that person. Not by any means. It's saying that when you use your intelligence wisely, you're going to look deep before you leap. You're going to make sure that the person is karmically matched to you and spiritually matched to you, so that when you produce something of worth, whether it be a child, whether it be something of a literary work of art, whatever it is, a masterpiece of any kind, right? You're going to link yourself with someone that is going to help you to produce something of a value that's much greater than yourself and those that are around you. That's how we use this science. And so that's how our ancestors were able to produce societies that literally lasted for 4,000 years. You don't do that by haphazardly mating.
Yeah.
Called dynasties, right? When we start really understanding the implications of this science, right? The 5th house is the 5th sign, right? And akin to the 5th house is understanding how destinies are made, how dynasties are created through those destinies, because that they're interconnected. That's how we use it to navigate and move forward. If you're trying to birth a warrior, it'd be best to birth them at a certain time when that Mars is in a certain position.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be best to, this is how spiritual science is used, right? It's not just to get out of situations or to avoid situations. It's to manifest situations.
Yeah.
And children are not, they're not outside that context, right? So when you're mating, you want to, if you can, use the time properly to say, hey, you know, in 9 months from now, where will the planets be?
Mm-hmm.
If you impregnated, if a woman says, look, I want you to impregnate me right now because I know this is going to produce this type of being. Think about it from this perspective. 9 months ago, if someone had gotten pregnant, they would have a child with an exalted Mars right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Had they, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exalted Mars with a conjunct Saturn in its own
Saturn.
sign.
Yep. Yep.
Right? So if we wanted to produce that, let's say our own African Schwarzkopf, right, General Schwarzkopf, or the next great Colin Powell, right? Just using them as example, right? Poor example, but right, or the next great
Or
Huey P.
Hannibal.
Newton, right, or Hannibal, or whatever, right? That person's gonna have to have that Mars and Cap, or somewhere Mars is gonna have to be like tip top tight.
Yeah.
Right. That's how we begin to, if we want to produce a great spiritual leader, well, we need Jupiter tight. Right? Well, Jupiter makes a pattern every 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see what I mean? Like, we got to start. That's when you become, right? When you practice astrology, not just talk about it. But practicing astrology is different, folks, than teaching it, talking about it. Much different. Because then you're actually in real time trying to apply certain principles to gain an outcome, not just like materialistically speaking, but spiritually speaking, right? Emotionally speaking, mentally speaking. All these things are within the context of being able to understand how these cycles work. So, bar none, right? If you're trying to produce a child, if you want to say you want to get Gekasara yoga, where the moon is is in either conjunct or in 1, 4, 7, or 10 from 4, 7, or 10 from Jupiter. Right. Well, then you would consult an astrologer, say, hey, in about a year from now, right? When will the moon be conjunct Jupiter? It's that simple.
Yeah.
And you watch the child come out, and you say, "See," and you be like, "It's almost like it's like a formula, like magic, like it works every time." Right? You take it to the bank. Mars conjunct Moon, we got a Chandra Mongol Yoga.
Mm-hmm.
You want a female warrior, right? Because there are female warriors. There's warriors that have the propensity to be able to handle the feminine side of what we deal with as far as protection. So they have females that protect females, in other words. That's within the nature of creation. But nonetheless, right, they can never outdo what the masculine side does in the sense that the masculine integrity at its best can always outdo any woman at its masculine side. And a woman can always outdo any man in its feminine integrity. So that's the balance of the universe, but they do cross over slightly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we want that sister to come in, and let's say we need a sister in our nation or country or village or whatever, and we need that sister to be born to maybe be the one that kind of like shepherds the others. We want a sister with the moon, right, conjunct Mars, with maybe an strong aspect from Jupiter to give her that well-rounded sense of sensibility. You can create these beings, right? It's within the context of man to create. That is what we mean by when we say create in the fifth house sense. Does that make sense to you, my brother? That bring it home to when we say when we create, you can create a being. You can, well, let's say not create, co-create, because the supreme being will always have the ultimate outcome.
Yeah.
Ultimate say of the outcome, but nonetheless, you still have an input on the timing of it. And timing is usually half the battle. So
Indeed.
when you're out there creating, right, co-create, look at the timing. Look to see when Mars might be debilitated, right? Try to say, well, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't make love. Let's wait a month and a half. And then and then Mars will move out of that position in the next 9 months. And actually, Mars will then be in Leo, which is an excellent place to have Mars. So then let's make love, baby. Mars is going to be strong. We need that type of entity in our family, in our lineage, in our village, or whatever it is. That's how we create.
Indeed.
And with that, we'll leave it as such. We will touch on this subject and other matters, folks, so it won't be left here. But I just wanted to give you just a general kind of backdrop of why and how we look at a chart and why we see children either through 1, the 5th house, 2, the 2nd, the 5th lord, or 3, Jupiter. Right? I hope that kind of expands it and unpacks it for some folks. Like I said, as we move on to different things like female, when we talk about the female aspect of astrology, a lot more of these things will come out as far as, you know, how these things work. But for the most part, I think we've gotten a good bead on how to look at this and how to understand why these connections are there.
Absolutely. So, you know, like always, you know, this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Calipusha Astrology, and our Patreons. Remember, you know, go support us on Patreon. You know, there's a bunch of different packages, and there's some good opportunities on there too. So definitely go check us out on Patreon. We'll, you know, go to our Instagram. You can get to everything from our link and our profile on Instagram at Cosmic Convo on Instagram. It's the same handle. It's Cosmic Convos Podcast on Facebook. So we have them there. And also we've been starting putting the podcast on Facebook as well. So, you know, for all our Facebook people, if that's, you know, you feel, you know, it's easier for you to check out the podcast on Facebook, we're on there as well. So make sure you go.
Stop there.
Yeah.
Man, don't tell me I did this. Oh my God. I did record.
I got backup. I got you backed up.
Oh, good. All right, brother. Good. All right, good.
I got you backed up.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, for all our people on Facebook, you know, go check us out there. You know, if that's more easy, you know, much more easier for you to tune in and share with your people, man. Let everybody know what we got going on here, so we can you know, again, take this astrological conversation to a whole new level and whatnot. So again, I think this is another classic show. We're gonna be back here next week with another great episode for you. And you know, Brother Rob, if you don't got nothing else to say, man, we can go ahead and close it out.
One thing I do have to say is when the podcast kind of makes a general announcement, astrologically speaking, keep your eyes and ears to the news and to your surroundings and things that are going on. There was a show I mentioned that the way this virus is going to work is that during the summer months, the virus is going to reduce itself to its essence and then come back full force, right, in the fall. And I've been hearing it kind of gradually before I even said I knew this was coming. I knew when it very first hit, I said, "Oh, this is just the beginning. This is nothing." When the fall hits, that's when we're going to truly be tested. But nonetheless, astrologically speaking, I mentioned that in the show, in that when these things shift and change, this is why astrologically we can record and look up, say, yep, Rahu's going to be moving into this position. And at the same time, not only that, but the other planets are going to move into their positions to then create a further second, I want to say outbreak, but second wave of this, right, coming up. So just keep your eyes and ears open to the news, to the media, to make sure, like, when you hear that and you say, hey, I think the podcast mentioned that that's something that could manifest out of this whole astrological thing, the way it's going, that, it could reintroduce itself, or things can shift this way or go that way. If you always, just like when we talk about Iran or different things about the eclipses, just kind of use these things to kind of provide yourself with what we call conviction, right? And conviction then builds the ability to understand and really use this science in a way that gives that level of confidence that you can now predict effectively. That's when you begin to see the patterns and say, yep, I'm confident if I say this is what's gonna manifest, and I vetted it through all these different things, and I see it in real life events, and it's in the news. Then you begin to say, yep, I can start to predict comfortably. So just keep watch, right, and pay attention and listen to what we say, so that when it actually comes out, right, later on, you're already kind of ahead of the curve and you can verify the power of astrology.
Absolutely. We're gonna have a little promo video coming up too with some of those statements in there, so stay tuned to that. All right. Yeah, so with that being said, thank you all for tuning in every week. Again, another shout out to our patrons, and shout out to everybody who's listening to the podcast and showing us support. All right, and we'll be back here next week, same place, same day, and we're out. Peace.